This is your boy Beezy. Thank you for watching another edition of Beezy Review Beats. I am here with the legendary, the man himself. Really appreciate him coming on. Needledrop, Anthony Fantano.
Thanks for having me on, dude.
Yeah. Today we're going to be reviewing the legendary hip-hop producer himself, Pete Rock, Petestrumentals Volume 2. Follow-up for his 2005 Surviving Elements instrumental and the sequel to his 2001 Petestrumentals. So, I guess I'll just kick it off with you first, Needledrop, and then I'll give my take on the project. What you think of it? Oh, debut by Mello Music Group as well.
Debut on Mello Music Group too. Yeah. Overall, I liked the record. I thought it had an interesting, or definitely had a flow to it. I mean, it felt like on the first half, a lot of the instrumentals took a bit of a lighter approach, and that kind of worried me at first because I was like, when's this thing really going to get going? But then a lot of the tracks toward the back end really started to hit a lot harder. I kind of was getting this impression, maybe for the first half, that the percussion was a little bit cleaner than I would have liked. But then when songs like Accelerate came in, I mean, just the bass was immense. And there was even one track that I wanted to write down because I definitely wanted to mention it. The song Make Me Feel Like, which the way all the layers on that track came together was super like psychedelic, just like stuff bleeding into each other, just like really weird and noisy, whereas like it just felt like the first half of the album Pete was like playing it super safe, or just like kind of sticking to just like really clean, just well cut and just very clearly put together instrumentals. But then when he started coming through with like that reggae flip, like on the second to last track on the track listing here, things really started to get interesting. I think he's on this record done a lot of stuff. There's a lot of versatility on this project. I mean, with the first half of this thing, I think he was kind of taking his kind of older, simple trademark style and sort of updating it, with just like kind of a modern production clarity. And then I felt like in the second half, you really started to go in and just started to venture out and start experimenting with some different stuff. And also even on those tracks, I think he plays it a little reserved. I think it's worth noting that, Pete comes from an era of hip-hop where the producer had a really specific role and the MC had a really specific role, and the producer wasn't necessarily supposed to, overtake the MC, in terms of, the focus of the song, and the MC was supposed to provide a certain level of, entertainment was supposed to be sort of in that spotlight as far as the message of the song or kind of the focus of the song. And, nowadays I feel like we're hearing producers that are a little bit more ambitious and MCs that, are maybe a little more based on charisma than their lyricism. So I think still that that sort of idea of what would make a great hip-hop beat is still kind of what guides him through a lot of these instrumentals, but still came through as a quality project. Like I said, I mean, really versatile, a lot of different flavors and sounds on this thing, and I liked how, the second half of the record here had a way different character than the first.
Okay, yeah, so for me, I think I always love how, with Pete Rock, you're going to get kind of like a boom bap, kind of smooth bass line feel throughout all of his beats, which I was expecting. And, like what you said, the first half, I would say maybe like the first quarter of it, I think, was like, okay, this is the Pete Rock that me and you or anybody else who's been a fan of him always known to love about his style. Soulful, boom bap, kind of like that 70s exploitations type of beat type of style, So, the first, what was that? Heaven and Earth and PR for Prayer. I think PR for Prayers and On are like to me, that's like the definition of that 70s blaxploitation type of style music that I can listen to like a Shaft. I can hear that being like on a Shaft soundtrack as an instrumental piece when I listen to like On and PR for Present. Actually, the track that you mentioned, Make Me Feel Like, that's actually my favorite track on there. I was just like, when I heard the different layers and how smooth, and another thing I love about Pete Rock instrumentals on here is that a lot of the drums, they don't have to be hard hitting. He can have some very light soft snares, some very light kicks, but you can still, I think the emotion of the sample the way he chops it up or the way he sequences the samples, it kind of, that emotion and feel of the beat kind of brings you in. So I think that track you named, Make Me Feel Like, was actually my favorite track just because of those reasons that I named. It was like, man, the drums were very soft. I was like, oh man, I barely hear the drums, but I'm still drawn into that beat. I like that reggae flip he did. I thought, like you said, I think it was a way for him to kind of be risky and kind of think outside the box. I'm glad he did that. He did that with that one. And I think the Dilla bounce, surprisingly, wasn't what I expected. I was expecting maybe a little bit more, because, when you hear producers, off the top of my head, like a Black Milk 14KT kind of do like a Dilla type of tribute, they're going to kind of chop and do beats kind of similar to how Jay Dilla does it. With this Dilla bounce, I was like, he didn't really go that route. I mean, I can see why he called it Dilla bounce, but I was expecting more of a like a Slum Village Fantastic Volume 2 type of feel when I saw it. When I saw the the Dilla tribute, I'm like, okay, he might give me something. The old Dilla, the Far Side Dilla. But it was something different. Not saying I was disappointed, but it kind of took me off guard. I was like, oh, okay, I wasn't expecting.
It kind of felt like just more of a tribute in name, like for whatever artistic reasons that he had over the process of creating that song, he just must have had him in mind, It didn't sound like he was directly kind of tributing his style, but more just like, just throwing him out there because, and we don't know how that track could have started off in a completely different way when he was producing it than how it actually ended, which, is another interesting thing to sort of think about. And I love the point that you made about how his drums don't necessarily need to hit hard. And, I think an emotion comes through on a lot of these beats, but most importantly, I think a groove comes through. I mean, I think Pete's grooves on these beats, even the more quiet beats in the track listing here, are super hypnotic, and just really like alluring.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Because when you say that, I think the video he got Cosmic Slot. That's one that's kind of like hypnotic, like nice little groove to it. I like the Rosie Rose sample. I wish that joint, even though I was thinking he was gonna go somewhere else with it, but he kind of stayed that little hypnotic type of style. I was like, okay, for him to do that on a sample, I was like, all right, Pete, I see you changing up a little bit, and I'm glad with this one he didn't make it. It wasn't an extension of Petestrumentals Volume 1, the first one. It's kind of like both of these projects sound completely different. I'm glad he didn't play it that safe and was like, you know what, I'm just going to make this an extension, give you guys 20 tracks, here you go. One thing I am surprised, though, I was hoping to have at least an MC or two spit on it, like he did on part 1. I think he had U&I Group, which consists of Rocky Marciano. Actually, he was on like a couple of tracks on his first one. So, not saying I wanted Rocky Marciano on this one, but I was hoping he'd probably throw in an MC here one or two there throughout the project. But overall, I still loved it. I still really enjoyed it. This was a great listen. I think for me, when it comes to instrumental projects, a lot of the tracks I think were a little too long. I think if you're going to make an instrumental project, if you're going to give me more tracks, make the tracks shorter. Like if you're going to give me 20, 25, almost 30 tracks of an instrumental project, give them to me like a minute and 15, minute and 30 seconds. Kind of give me in, let me listen to the beat, enjoy it, get me on to the next one. I think my only negative setback on this was I think some of the beats were drawn out a little too long. Now, I don't know if it was for purposes for someone to hear it and be like, yo, Pete, let me spit over this. But I just felt like a lot of tracks on there was a little drawn out too long. I mean, I do like how on some of them, he had a couple of switch ups, like, what's that, Play the Horn? Yeah, Play Your Horn. I thought that gritty, he really threw in that gritty, grimy New York feel at the end, the second part.
Play Your Horn was definitely one of the bigger tracks.
Yeah.
Just massive.
Yep, it was. But I think that was my only negative, I would say I don't like about it, is that the tracks were drawn out a little too long. Everything, like you said from the get-go, everything flowed well. Nothing seemed out of place, I guess you want to say. Nothing seemed too out of place. Everything fit well, and I'm glad Pete didn't play it the safe route. And I'm going to give you the Petestrumentals Volume 1, or I'm going to give you the 1995-96 Pete rock. I'm glad he didn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you for the most part with the length of the tracks. I think they definitely could have been shorter. Either that or just more change-ups, just like on the song Play Your Horn. Yeah, I mean, by the last quarter or third of some of these tracks, you've pretty much heard everything the song is going to deliver to you. And then, maybe they either kind of meet an abrupt end or they just sort of fade out. And maybe he was just kind of putting, I think, the intentions behind an instrumental album can kind of be weird. I mean, some artists will pull together an instrumental album and it kind of feels like the instrumentals are too long or they're too short or whatever, but, they sort of make the album knowing that, like, this is just the instrumental. This, like, right. It's kind of like listening to a song. It's kind of like listening to a series of songs that going into it are unfinished, Because typically in this style, I mean, you know, we're talking about not just beats, but the marriage of beats and lyrics, you know, and the fact that we're just getting one of those things, and we know we're getting one of those things going into an album, you know, sort of means that, you know, you're going to have tracks that maybe feel like they're too long, or that they could use something, lyrics. You know, but still, though, I do like the fact that, you know, Pete kind of strayed away from having any MCs on this project, because while, you know, you can listen to this project and hear sort of an older production approach, or a simpler production approach in some respects, you know, I think the fact that he came through with an album with no MCs on it also kind of speaks to the fact that today, I think we value producers a little bit more, or we, you know, sort of give them more spotlight than we used to. So, you know, it's totally cool for a guy like Pete Rock to come through these days with just, you know, a completely instrumental album and just hand that to us. I mean, while Petestrumentals, I mean, that record is over 10 years old at this point. I don't think sort of at that point, you know, you kind of had the you know, producers, hip-hop producers necessarily had the status then that they do today. You know, people don't necessarily gravitate toward, back then, didn't gravitate toward a track just because a certain producer was on it all the time, you know, and back then you didn't have the kind of way that people obsess over guys like Dilla and like Madlib, and, you know, and just like, you know, drool over their instrumentals and will probably listen to anything those guys produce for another artist. You know, which you could definitely see exemplified in the fact that, you know, the way Freddie Gibbs's career has kind of taken off recently, how he kind of collaborated with Madlib. I mean, you know, he's had talent before, but the way that he kind of experimented with what he was doing lyrically and got together with Madlib exposed him to a totally new audience. Yeah.
Yeah, you make a good point, because, you know, I remember when Petestrumentals first came out back in 2001, what big-time producer or well-known popular producer at the time was doing it? You know, like, no one. So for someone like him to making pretty much a complete instrumental project, I think that kind of set the bar. I think that set the bar, because I mean, you know, yeah, because then you had, you know, Donuts, and then you had Madlib with the Madlib Invasions and the Beat Conductors, and I mean, I can name on a slew of producers that released a lot of instrumental projects and made it like a series. You know what I'm saying? And kind of continue series. So for Pete Rock to do that, and then, you know, not to mention, he's made albums where it's just him on the production, and he had different MCs like Soul Survivor 1 and 2, and New York's Finest. So I think people forget, you know, Pete Rock, he set that standard, he set that bar for releasing, for people to appreciate instrumental albums and appreciate the quality of instrumental albums. So, you know, big up to Pete Rock for coming back, you know, plus 10 years later with a follow-up for Petestrumentals and coming strong, man. Really, really hitting hard and loving the vibes of this whole project of whatever what you like. Your soul sampling, some black exploitation, some experimenting a little bit here and there, you know, soft beats, soft drums, some hard soul boom bap drums, and just whatever type of flavor you want from that style, man. Big out to Pete Rock for doing that. So I enjoy this project. I like it. What you think?
Yeah, I mean, I liked it too. I mean, I don't really have many more complaints than you did. You know, I thought the beats were great. I thought they were produced well. You know, the first half of the record maybe went a little easier than I would have liked, but I mean, I thought all in all it was a great project. You know, and it's also just an interesting project to listen to and sort of think about, you know, the state of producers today versus the state of producers when Pete Rock originally came out with Petestrumentals versus the state of producers when, you know, he was working with CL Smooth on, you know, his earliest, most classic stuff.
This your boy Beezy 430, along with homie Needledrop. Appreciate you coming on and reviewing this project. We got to do more instrumental projects together.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it. Check y'all out later. Peace.
Bye.